Jason Barry is the Chief Technology Officer for Bluestone Mortgages, a fast-growing lender specialising in residential home loans. With over 20 years of international experience, Jason leads Bluestone's technology and innovation teams across Australia and New Zealand. He is passionate about the role of technology as an enabler of business opportunity and customer outcomes. Having been involved in and led a number of innovation and core modernisation initiatives, Jason has a keen insight into what it takes for non-digital and digital native businesses alike to succeed in a modern enterprise. So joining me on the Mindset Shift today is Jason Barry. Jason, welcome to the Mindset Shift, and really great to have you here and looking forward to chatting to you.
Thank you, Tim. Great to be here.
So tell me a bit about yourself, your background, where you're from, your upbringing, those type of things, please.
Yeah, sure. Where do I start? Well, look, my name is Jason Barry. I'll start with my immediate family. I'm married to the wonderful Rachel, and I have three children, Jack, who's 9, and twins Alice and Alexander, who are 5. So I'm currently CTO of an Australian non-bank home lender called Bluestone. And we are in Australia about 9 years. 9 years, January 2022, we'll be here in 9 years. Migrated directly here to the Mornington Peninsula and have been here ever since. I guess my day job is, as I said, working with Bluestone Home Loans. I'm a technologist at heart and by trade. And, I've always had a deep rooted interest in technology and computers from a really young age. I remember getting my first computer very fortunately when I was 6 years of age in 1984. I remember Mom saving up to buy the computer there was an old Commodore 64 center on Lavitt's Quay in Cork. And I distinctly remember Mom taking me there, she was paying off the computer over many months before Christmas that year. And then magically Santa brought the Commodore 64 to my home on that Christmas morning. And ever since, really, I've been on that kind of technology pathway. Started programming very young and, went to DCU when I was 17 doing computer applications. And here I am today in Australia in 2021.
So if we go back to the very start and tell me where you're from and tell me, before you got to 6 years of age, let's go back to that part. Your family circumstances and, were you the only child? Were you part of a large family? And where were you born?
Yeah, so I was born in Cork, born in the Urnville. So I'm probably a Cork man, Tim. As a child, I grew up in the countryside near Connor, which is in East Cork. Mum and Dad were working class. Mum, I don't know, Tim, if you remember tobacco leaves. People used to do tobacco leaves on the kitchen table. Mum used to do that. Dad used to work in a sawmill just outside Fermoy. I think it was called Woodfab, I think is what they were called back in the day. So, working class. My parents are very young, and a huge inspiration in my life has always been my mother. Mum educated herself, went to, she worked very hard, and Mum went back to school, and she did a whole raft of things. But I remember her doing, she'll kill me now if I get it wrong, but it was a certificate in sociology. There's interior decorating in there, but more interesting, she also did a diploma in economics. And then over the years, she went back and she did a degree in law, and then she ended up doing a higher diploma in adult education. So Mum always instilled a deep-rooted sense of education and the importance of books and learning in our house. So myself and my brother Stuart, who's just a year older than me, growing up in the countryside back in the early 80s it was not very glamorous, as you can imagine. But we had a good, solid childhood. We worked hard. As I said, Dad worked in timber, so we worked hard. But we were exposed to all of the things we needed to grow academically and mentally as well. So as I said, that gave me a very strong kind of basis in terms of, I guess, appreciating the value of hard work and what you had to do to get ahead, and also the value of an education. And because I had always had an interest in always electronics actually, and computers. For me, from a very early age, that's what I wanted to do, you know.
So tell me, Jason, about the word you mentioned about your mom, which is a really fascinating word for me to hear, that she was an inspiration to you. Because, you know, I love when I hear people talk with their parents with such affection, and that you've obviously talked about your dad and your mom there. But the word inspiration is very different. You know, and many people talk fondly of their parents, but you've called out a special word called inspiration. So let's tease that out a bit more, please.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, when did mum go back to education? I guess it was around 1986, 87, something like that. Nothing was easy in Ireland in 86 and 87 in that time. And mum would have been only, what, 24, 25? You know, wouldn't have had a lot of access to funds. So, you know, the local credit union was a huge, huge support to mum. And mum was always very, very financially astute. She knew it wasn't a save a penny, something, you know, build a pound, something like that. She knew the merit of saving. So, you know, I saw how hard she had to work to get ahead. And, you know, we had encyclopedias, and, you know, we didn't have a lot of money, but we had encyclopedias. And as I said, when I was 6, I got a Commodore 64. And I remember how much that computer was. It was £256 at the time in 1984, which is a lot of money, right? So we really did appreciate that from a very young age. And as we grew up, obviously, look, my mum's family in Tallow and County Waterford as well. You know, my grandparents there, they owned a haulage company, and they always worked very hard. My grandfather worked till only a few years before, until a few years before he died. And, you know, they were, you know, so it was very much a working class family. But mum always wanted better for myself and Stuart. You know, we could have easily gone down the route of doing something in the trades. And you know what? That would have been an amazing career as well. But as I said, I went off doing computers, and Stu has since become a teacher. So he teaches mathematics in Blackwater High, Lismore. Fortunately, we were very sporting as well, Tim.
Okay.
And honestly, when you grow up splitting blocks, it's amazing how good you get at football and hurling. Not that we might have been all that skillful, but we had the fitness and the strength to play it from a very young age. And I first tugged out for Tallow, and you might remember the great Ned Power, who played for Waterford. He was deeply involved with the underage clubs in Tallow, and he kind of took us under his wing, and we played underage in Tallow and came up to the ranks. And, you know, really, really great memories going down to the fields in Tallow. And my particular passion was in football, which probably at the time, being from playing in a Waterford club, wasn't very, I didn't see any All-Irelands in my future. Let me put it that way. But I loved playing football at the time. And I was lucky enough to, I played underage for Waterford. I played under 14, under 16, minor, under 21. And then I think probably Reardon's in Cork got the best of me, and the senior career was a bit out of my grasp, to be honest with you, Tim. But fantastic time to grow up, you know. So I feel that we grew up with a real balance of, you know, a real work ethic, but a real appreciation for an education. And again, one helps the other so much, you know. So yeah, and mum was a huge part of that, you know. She'd never let us slack off on homework or anything like that. She was very, you know, like most mums, to be honest with you, you know, she'd put the extra hours in and making sure that the multiplication tables were done, that the homework was done. But then, you know, also she'd drive to the training, make sure we were where we needed to be. And look, to be honest with you, it's probably no surprise that later in life, then I met my wife, Rachel, who at the time was in 4th year Maid in UCC. And Rachel's mum, unfortunately died when she was 15. And her particular situation wasn't very easy. And she certainly pulled herself up by her own bootstraps. And, you know, she went to UCC under a scholarship. And so, yeah, psychologists could have a field day with that. looking at my mum and then now looking at Rachel as such a strong, successful woman as well, who didn't come up through the traditional channels,
It's interesting the visualization of your mom going in weekly or monthly or bi-weekly. The trip from Connacht to Lavitt's Key is not an easy trip if you think about it, right? To pay off this 256 quid over whatever period of time, 13 weeks or 20 weeks or whatever period of time, because she wanted this for you, for your Christmas present. And even though the innocence of you walking in, Jason, with her many weeks, okay, paying the money over the counter on the weekly sub, and yet Santa delivering it is just a brilliant picture. If you think about it like this, 6-year-old is going in with his mom, she's giving money over the counter to buy the computer that Santa's delivering to him, at Christmas. It's just a brilliant visualization from your memory. But if you were to pick one thing for your mom, what would be the one thing you would take, or other than work ethic and education, which you've talked about, that made a difference to me as I carried through my journey? What would that be?
So I guess it would be, never give up, really. I know it's probably related to the work ethic thing, but one of my particular strengths is probably creative and lateral thinking. So I'll always find a way, and it's that stems from the fact that we came from a working class background, and with the greatest of respect to the people that I grew up in the community with, there was a lot of probably bigger farmers around, who probably had a lot more opportunities, or probably had a lot more access to opportunities, let me say. So for us, mum never gave up. So for myself and Rach, we never give up. So if we put our mind to something, like moving to Australia and being successful and doing that, which is a huge undertaking, that's one thing I would take away.
What was school like for you? I mean, you said sport was important, and Ned Power in Tallow, and football was your preference, and in Waterford that would be a real challenge at that point, and since in many situations. But what was school like for you? Primary school and in second level school.
So I went to primary school in Cork National School, which is a really small community school between Connacht and Tallow, as it happens. Very small classes, very intimate classes. We had two teachers, the wonderful Mrs. Hayes and the wonderful Mrs. Collins. Again, really strong female role models. I thought that the standard of education that we got in Cork was absolutely fantastic. And I'll back that up in a second when I talk about when we went to secondary school. But we really enjoyed it. We didn't know any better, to be honest. We had great times. We didn't have a lot. Nobody really had a lot, to be honest, back then. Mrs. Collins certainly was she was an amazing teacher, and fortunately, I think both Mrs. Hayes and Mrs. Collins are still going strong. But yeah, I really enjoyed it. We had access to not much. I remember the excitement of getting one basketball ring into the schoolyard. And I remember towards the end of my time in Corglass, we started participating in credit union quizzes, which was another the school quizzes. I don't know if you remember them, Tim. That was really exciting, and I was fortunate enough to be captain of one of the table quizzes. And Lord knows today I'm not the guy that you want in your table quiz. So no, I have really fond memories of Corglass. Going to Lismore, where in Corglass we had very small classes. So there was 9 in my class. So again, a very intimate setting. In Stuart's class, there was 2. So really, really, really small classes. And both Stu and I went to Lismore CBS. He went in 1989, I went in 1990. Again, it was a huge thing for both of us. Any of the kids going from small country schools to any form of a secondary school was a big thing, and Lismore was not a big school by any stretch of the imagination. I think back then it had maybe 250, maybe 300 pupils. But we settled fairly quickly. We were one of the things, again, I remember one of the teachers saying to us that, the kids who came out of our primary school were always quite smart, which was really good. I mean, not that I thought much of that at the time, but we obviously had a kind of a foundation level that gave us the basic tools to really get ahead in secondary school. Again, what helped both of us was that Lismore back then had a really good hurling program under John Heenan, who's still there today. In fact, Stuart teaches with John in Blackwater High to this day. So Stu went back to Blackwater High. Lismore was knocked down, and they brought all of the local schools together, and Stu is still there. But that hurling program is great as well. We got to play underage, and we won a solo cup, and both Stu and I played on the Heart Cup team in 1995. We played in the Heart Cup final against Milton. And that was amazing. Stu was the captain. He was centre forward and I was full back. So that was amazing for us, growing up. So again, very fond memories of Lismore CBS. Some really good teachers. Again, we didn't have the best of facilities, but we had a really good sense of school and community. And especially when the school did well at the few things it was good at, which one was definitely sport. And that was again a really, really fun time. I remember we had again access to computer labs. This is back in the early 90s when, most schools probably didn't. So coupled with the fact that I had access to computers at home and access to computers in school, again, that helped for me to solidify what I wanted to do for myself, So overall, very, very fond memories. And, when I reflect on my time in both, I can certainly see how they had a huge influence on kind of making me the person that I am today.
It's interesting you talk about Lismore because they have a great hurling tradition, and particularly in Hartley Cup level. But the fact that you talk with your brother so fondly, so obviously yourself and Stuart have a very good relationship, and that has continued to this day, is what I pick up from this conversation.
Yeah, Stuart's I say he's a gas man would be an understatement. Because look, we were very much, I guess, the Irish twins. Stu was only 14 months older than me. And when we were growing up in the countryside, there was only the two of us, really. So, we'd access to power tools, hammers, nails, and the rest of it. And we'd go off making carts and shields and swords and bows and arrows and probably doing the things that kids shouldn't do, But yeah, we grew up very close. And because we grew up very close, and he always looked out for me, I was very skinny. I was a skinny, tall one, and he was a shorter, more barrelly one, we'll say. And he always looked out for me. So no, myself and Stu have a great relationship. And, again, coming up in sport, as we went through the underage levels, we played on the same team typically for a year or two, until he moved on. And then the year after I moved on, and we were fortunate enough to, in some codes, he'd be captain, he'd be my captain. And then he'd move on and I'd get a chance to be the captain, and he was a great role model to me as well. And not only in sport, but we were in scouts as well in Tallow. And as Stuart being an overachiever, of course, he was the sixer, I was the seconder, he was the leader, so I've always had him there to look up to, and we actually both went to New York back in 1999, which is something that will either break a brotherhood or will cement it forever. We went to New York and we lived in Woodlawn in the Bronx. I don't know if you know it, Tim.
I do.
I'm sure you do. So we had an apartment. We went over playing football for Westmeath, and we ended up playing football for Westmeath and hurling for Waterford. And we had an apartment in Woodlawn. And I remember we bought a TV and we put the TV up in a box. And the box we bought it in. Stu slept on a camper bed and I had a mattress. And he worked with a carpenter up in Connecticut, which is very nice. Whereas I got to work on building sites in South Manhattan, carrying blocks and mixing cement. So I don't know who got the less good end of the stick in that respect. But we had a great summer. Again, Stu ended up staying on in New York for a couple of years, working as a carpenter. Again, he ended up being captain of, Waterford hurling and all that kind of stuff. They were great years. They were amazing years. Back then we used to just go to Shannon. When we'd fly over for a game, I was lucky enough to go over and back a few times. You'd rock up to Shannon on a Friday with the hurley, and you'd walk through immigration just carrying the hurley. And the guys knew where you were off and what you were doing for the weekend, and you could stick the hurley into the overhead on the plane. It was fantastic. Great times.
Yeah, times of great innocence when you look back at it, Jason, and different
Absolutely.
times, as you say, stick to hurley in the overhead compartment is just, it would be unheard of in the modern world,
Absolutely. Yeah. Well,
So
Stu throughout was definitely he was always there, and he's got his own family now back in Tallow. As I said, he's a teacher back in Blackwater High. One of the, I guess, the unfortunate things about immigration is a separation. And Stu has 3 kids now. There's Adam, Megan, and Gavin, and we've never actually met the kids. Adam is 5, the eldest is 5. We've never met them, and vice versa. He's never met our twins, who are also 5. And Adam will be he'll be 6 in a week or two. So he'll be 6 years of age. We won't have met him, and we were meant to go back last year, but unfortunately COVID hit, and we were unable to get there. But we'll get there eventually, I'm sure.
It'll be a trip that will be worth waiting for when you eventually get over the post-COVID travel opportunities.
Absolutely.
So obviously computers, you talked about, the Commodore 64 and at 6 years of age, and then particularly in Lismore, you had a lot of computer opportunities. How did you end up in DCU? I mean, was that the choice? Was that where you ended up in your points, or what was the DCU realization?
Yeah, so at the time when I was looking around at the courses, DCU had a course called Computer Applications, and obviously Trinity, UCD, DIT, and I wanted to go to Dublin. There was a lot of folks in my class in Lismore. They'd go to Cork, but I really wanted to go out there and just experience life. Kind of get outside of my comfort zone. And when I did the research on the employment, the employment levels out of the various courses, the computer applications course in DCU scored very, very highly. So that was actually the primary reason why I wanted to go there. It gave me the best opportunity based on the research that I'd done of securing a really good role after the primary degree.
And you're moving from Tallow to Dublin. It's a huge move. You talked about you wanted to stretch yourself. You wanted to, experience life in that sense. But in 1995, that's a massive change in your whole infrastructure. Obviously, you don't have your big brother with you. If you think about your journey up to that point in time, and so your world has completely changed. How did you adapt to that?
Too easily, I'd say, to be honest. Tim, I was very lucky again. I kind of made a commitment to myself that I was going to give it everything. Right? I'm not an extrovert, and I'm not an introvert. I am what I need to be in the environment that I am, that I find myself. And I knew I was not going to succeed in Dublin unless I really put myself out there. And I'm not a natural, hey, how are you going kind of person, but I knew I'm not going to make friends unless I really put myself out there. And, there's a book, How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. And, he speaks about a few things like, there's no sweeter sound to a person than the sound of their own name. And if you ask a person questions, they'll keep talking all day, like you're doing to me right now. And really, I embraced that. I just went into the class, immersed myself in it. I was very lucky in that, again, I started playing football, which was great in DCU. And we had a couple of really good players. Sean O'Halpine was in DCU at the time. So myself and Sean O were playing freshers football together, which was great crack. But I ended up getting a flat with 2 guys, Connor and Paddy, and we had an extended circle of friends that included a guy called Mike and Colin. And Colin I played football with. Colin was from Mayo, and to this day we're the best mates. We're best of friends. So I fell in with a very good group of like-minded and complementary individuals. We all brought something different. None of us were the same. And we just carried each other through it, most weeks we wouldn't have, 2 pennies to rub together, but we'd pitch in what we had, and we'd get the yellow pack bread or the beans or the whatever, and we'd get by. We'd always have enough for the 6-pack of Dutch Gold if we had to, But it was great times again. But it's about putting yourself out there, making yourself vulnerable, asking questions, and being interested in other people, and that's really what kind of allowed me to get ahead in Dublin.
It's interesting you mentioned Dale Carnegie's book, because when he talks about, learning people's names, that means you have to have an interest, because sometimes that can be seen as a glib book, just, calling people by their name and ask questions. But it does really, if you take it in a deep way, it means you have to have an interest. If you want to learn somebody's name and make sure you call the right name every time you're speaking to them, that's a real sign of, I'm interested in you, while we're talking or while we're engaged in that sense. And that is something that sadly today, some people forget, that you must actually put time to learn and have an interest in people if you want to get something meaningful out of the engagement. Is that a fair assessment?
I would agree 100%. After I read that book, and Carnegie also speaks about, I think he gave an example of like a store teller, and the name badges that they wear. And to this day, when I go into a store, if a person is wearing a name tag, and they frequently are, I'll address them by their name. And the shocking thing is that person might meet a couple of hundred people in a day, and they might never hear their name. So when you thank them, thank you, Tim, it means so much more. It means that person took the time to read my name badge. And if I have an interaction with somebody on a call, or somebody calls at the house or anything like that, and they're, I'll always ask them their name. And there's incredible power in that, because as you said, you're showing interest. Obviously, you're trying to get something from the transaction. Both of you are trying to get the best possible outcome. And what, in a very simple way, what it's saying is you can get a better outcome for both parties by being interested and listening and being inquisitive. And it starts with the basics, just asking somebody their name.
And it's a really important point, Jason, that is overlooked. The sound of somebody's name in a conversation, like looking at a name tag, it's something I do as well. I'm very big into first names. So, I will spend a lot of time learning people's first names. Second names, the surnames, not material in the conversation, but the first name is really important. And what I find is it breaks the ice. It makes them realize this person, as you said, take the store keeper who speaks to 400 or 500 people, and one person mentions their name. That's the person they'll remember. That they won't remember much about them, but this person actually mentioned my name today. And there's a saying that I use very frequently, which is, people want to know that you care before they care what you know. And I think people leading, people in organizations and in businesses need to never forget that. We need to show an interest in our people if we really want to get the best out of them. And sometimes we just don't show enough of an interest, in my experience, in the people side of it. And calling them by their name is a great example of a simple way of showing interest and showing care about people.
I could not agree more. There was a lady, fast forwarding a little bit to when I was working with a company called ThoughtWorks, who are an incredible organization. Probably one of the top software consultancies in the world, and probably considered one of the origins of the agile kind of movement, right? Agile delivery and everything else that has spun from that. So when you work with ThoughtWorks, you're surrounded by very smart people. So if you have any cop on at all, you're on receive mode. You just want to listen to what these people are saying, because they have insights and experiences that you pay anything to get. And I was in a fortunate position to have direct access to it for nothing. It was my job to be exposed to it. And there was a lady called Fiona Phillips, and Fiona was a GM for customer with IAG here in Australia. And she ended up taking a principal advisory role in ThoughtWorks. And we were working with one of the big four banks here in Australia. And Fiona was very, very free with giving her time and her advice, that kind of paid forward type of mentality. And this is about 4 or 5 years ago or something like that. And I was well and truly on my way in my career. I had a head of digital services position. I've had a head of technology innovation position with a ASX listed company. So, I was well on my way, understanding I had a hell of a lot to learn. And Fiona said to me, we have to be mindful of the shadows that we cast as leaders, right? And she said, it is long and a lot of people fall under it. And we have to be mindful of that. Meaning what we say, what we do is amplified in the eyes and ears of some folks, you know. And putting it in such I think, a visual way for me, you know, it really landed with me. And every interaction that I have, most interactions that I have, I am hyper mindful of that. So, you know, my current role, which I love, I absolutely love what I'm doing at the moment. I'm working with some, again, so fortunate to work with amazing people. And part of my responsibilities when I could travel was that I traveled to Sydney once every 2 weeks to you know, just to be present, you know. And it's not that I go to Sydney to, you know, have any super important meetings, although you could probably say the most important meetings. I'm not doing anything super technical. I spend probably a 12-hour day walking the floor. And I'm just asking people how they're going, how the kids are, how did that training go? I sit down, I ask them what they're doing. I show an interest. And it's not out of a sense of, you know, feeling I have to do it, or that it's, I am genuinely interested. And being authentic and genuine in that way, people can build a better and deeper relationship with you. So and it's not so much about when things are easy and going well, it's when things are hard, which over the last 18 months, unfortunately, they've been more hard than not. And that's how you can build team resilience, because you can trust one another, because you've had that, you know, deeper, more meaningful conversation. We as leaders need to be vulnerable. We need to share part of ourselves. And that allows people to see us for the human being, as well as their boss or manager or whatever we are in a professional context.
I love the comment about mindful of the shadow that you cast, because, you know, if you think of a shadow, so if you think of you as a person and the sun is shining and your shadow is cast, the shadow at all the edges are important, because sometimes, you know, it's not just the center of the shadow where the shadow is obviously at its deepest, you know, because you can be very mindful of that, you know, impact, because, you know, the people are at the center of the shadow. But I think great leaders are conscious of the impact of people who touch the shadow all at the edges. And I think that's sometimes the difference for me, in my view, between leaders and managers, which is a fundamental difference. But that's one of the big differences between leaders, great leaders and managers, is that they're conscious of, you know, the everybody who touches the shadow, not just the people at the center, where managers tend to focus on people at the center who have the biggest impact on them. Is that a fair assessment of one of the differences between leadership and management?
Yeah, again, you're not saying much that I wouldn't disagree with, Tim. Sometimes I deliberately provoke a reaction from folks, you know, and, you know, this interesting conversation about we need leaders, not managers, kind of a thing, right? And I have said those words to various groups of people over time, where, you know, I've openly said to people who have the word manager in their title that I don't need managers, I need leaders.
Can I just jump in there, Jason? No, can I just jump in that point? I do not believe everybody can be a leader, because I do not believe everybody wants to be a leader. Okay, I believe there are people who are really happy being followers. Okay, who are really successful and professional, and that role can be management, which means they're managing people, but not necessarily leading people. So I think one of the challenges, you know, in this area is that we want everyone to be leaders, even though, you know, I mean, I played sport like you, so go back to you were captain of the quiz club you talked about at one stage in school. You know, there are people who want to lead. There are people who, you know, and then there are people who aren't comfortable not being the leader. And I just think we have to be careful of demanding that everyone becomes a leader in the modern world.
I would agree with you, because you do need to have people who can coordinate, administer, implement, execute, and all those kind of things as well. I guess, as I said, I do it sometimes deliberately to provoke a reaction, to get people to think about, well, what is your role? Because a lot of people move up to the ranks in an organization aspiring to be a manager of some form. But in a modern digital enterprise, people who sit in those roles, yes, they have a title of manager, but it's more about their influence. right? They are in a position of influence. So how do you exercise that influence to deliver on the outcomes required to drive an organization forward? And that is, in my case, if they're my two ICs, they're typically, it's about leadership, right? Where you're able to identify the people who possess those specialist skills to do the management and coordination and orchestration. And, I absolutely value all of those things. But when you need to break inertia, you almost need to be radical in your thinking and your approach, right? You've just got to pick up the flag and just go lead, go take the hill, because if you sit at the table, planning or looking at a spreadsheet all day, well, somebody else is taking the hill. I can guarantee you that. So again, it's not to say there is no value in management. There absolutely is. And people management is by far and away the hardest part of, I think, any leader's job, right? Because we cannot achieve these outcomes by ourselves. We have to work with other individuals who have other motivations, which are often different to our own. And we often think that, well, people are motivated by money. Typically, that's one small part of it. And often people are motivated by purpose, by sense of self-worth, by, yes, and money, making sure that they have a stable income. So it's understanding what motivates individuals is, when you understand that, you can really dial in on how to get the best from them, be they managers or developers, whatever they are. Fundamentally, they're human beings, and we're all motivated by something.
And I would say, Jason, the important thing as a leader or as a manager is that every role must be respected equally, because they're just roles in an organization. Whether you're the CEO or whether you're the janitor, your role is important to the contribution of that organization. Because if you don't do your role, whatever that role is, then the organization cannot operate to its maximum. It will be what my view. The other thing I think is interesting about, pick up the flag and go up the hill. One of the things when I talk to people about leadership in organizations and different groups, one of the fundamental characteristics I believe a leader needs is courage. And that's something that, is picking up the flag and going up the hill. Okay, obviously you have to have the data, knowing what's at the top of the hill, or you have to have all the other infrastructure, knowing what, how you get up the hill and all those information points that are required. But you fundamentally must have the courage to pick up the flag, because that to me is what separates people, in leadership, when we talk about leadership, because the things you've talked about, people management, caring for people, respecting everybody's role, irrespective of the role, they're fundamentally critical to any person who is in management and or leadership, or any person who's just working with people. But then I love the image of picking up the flag and going up the hill. I just think it's a brilliant image,
Yeah, and you look at the world in 2021, and I was having this conversation today actually with he's a supplier of mine. He's a great guy. He works in the cloud services space, and we were talking about the talent, or let's say not the lack of talent, but the war for talent here in Australia, which I'm absolutely sure is the same at home. And what will win the day is culture, because now talented, capable people have options, and people won't stay just because you pay them more money. They can get more money down the road. That's no longer the differentiator here. Differentiator is culture. And you speak about respect. That's enormously important. For me also as a human being, again, talking about the shadow that we cast in the not just in the center, but also around the fringes. What we walk past is what we accept. And I certainly in my life, if I see something that I don't agree with, if I see somebody being disrespected, that's something that I take action on very quickly. And feedback is very important. In Bluestone, feedback is very, very, a very important part of our culture. And it's almost very much akin to the kind of Netflix radical candor type culture. which is you need to be able to expect culture from anywhere, anytime, from anyone, and that you need to listen, and accept it, but you might not necessarily agree with it, and you might not do anything about it. But you need to, you need to listen and be in receive mode in a respectful way, as long as it is given in a respectful way. And I have been in different situations professionally throughout my career, where, let me say, being an immigrant hasn't always been easy. Even if you are a white male that's over 6 foot tall, people still have a crack, right? And even in a professional white collar setting, I've been privy to Irish jokes while I'm present, and I'm obviously the only Irish guy there. And I just called that individual out straight away. And because you can't let those things go by, because while I probably am fortunate enough to be seen to have more of a voice, there are some folks in that room who might not have that voice. And it is up to people to speak out and not tolerate the things that might have been tolerated maybe 10, 15 years ago, So respect is very important. And if we do that and we demonstrate respect for everybody, we live by our values, we do great work, with clever people and great partners, and we, think creatively, and, we relentlessly pursue our objectives, people tend to stick around. They can see that there's that, the smart people will stick around and they go, this is an organization or a culture that I want to be part of, and certainly over the last 18 months, we've seen that, through the many hard times that we've had, really it's reflecting or living by our values with the people and being vulnerable and showing a way and having those difficult conversations, but still continuing to focus on what are we trying to achieve and how can we achieve that together. That's gotten us to where we are today,
Your career, when you left college, obviously then went into the technology world, and we'll talk a bit about where you are today, but you moved into management, and you've just talked for the last number of minutes about your philosophy and things that really are natural to you or have become natural to you as regards how you care about people and how you lead people. Talk to me about the explosion of technology, because you left college, at 99, I think it was, you left college. So, the technology has exploded in the last 22 years, and you've been at the center of that explosion. How significant has that been for you in your career, and obviously significant for the society in general?
Yeah, so I'll reflect upon my own career first, because I do need to just again speak to some people who've had an incredible impact in my life. So my first job out of college was with a company called Rand. They were a Canadian-based CAD software company who had an office down in Clonakilty. And Tim, I'm sure you know Clon, and I'm sure you know what the bars was like back in the early 90s. It was one of the best places in the world to live. Genuinely, it was, every day was sunshine, and it was fantastic. And I really loved my time down in Clon. I was there for about 9 months, but I ended up getting a job off the back of that. I met two guys, one of which a chap called Yaz Yos Erkan, who has since become a dear family friend, and Yos migrated to Colorado with his family. They lived in Douglas. They migrated to Colorado about 7 years ago. But Yos moved to a company in Cork called Decare Systems Ireland. And honestly, to this day, I believe that company is one of the great unsung heroes of the Irish software scene. There was a guy called John Murphy and Eamon Franklin. The two guys were heading up that company. And we had an amazing workforce and amazing clients. There was a guy called Michael Walsh. I'm not sure if you heard of him, but he was, I'm going to get his title incorrect, but he basically, he was chairman and president of Delta Dental Plan of Minnesota. So he's very well established in the American dental and medical insurance industry. And Mike was originally a Mayo man. And in the late 90s, he set up a data entry center in Mayo, and he set up a data ops center in Cork. obviously tax efficient, and Ireland with the talent, etc. And it was 50% owned by an e-commerce company and 50% owned by the company in Minnesota. And my first week there, I ended up going to Michigan. I was only 21, I think. I ended up going to Michigan to work with another Delta plan. I was just off, go to Michigan, don't mess it up. It was fantastic. And I ended up cutting my teeth and being surrounded by incredible mentors who gave you space to grow. And we had these amazing clients. So, we worked with big travel companies, big e-commerce companies. I don't want to mention their names, but, so I mean, genuine global brands that we all know and love today. And I ended up staying with DCare Systems for 14 years. And I lived in Cork, and I spent most of my time either living and working in the US, or later on, I ended up doing a lot of consultancy in Europe and Africa, and so on and so forth. And that was incredible. That was an incredible opportunity. We were creating software that was driving some of the insurance, a large part of the dental insurance industry in the US, which is massive, absolutely massive. DCare subsequently got acquired by Anthem, who are a giant medical insurance company. I ended up going more into the product space. John, again, an inspiration. John was like a scuba diving, flying, exec, he's a great guy. He ended up in a really serious accident, climbing accident in Chamonix, I think. And once he came out of rehab, we were having a conversation. He was just talking, well, surely we can use mobile phones to do something. And we ended up building SafeTracks, which is now, I don't have anything to do with the platform today, but, I think it's probably the de facto standard for the use of mobile technology in search and rescue. And that's all built out of Cork. That company is now 8 West, and John and Eamon went through management buyout a few years ago. So that was incredible. We built disruptive, in a very positive sense, technology using consumer electronics. And I think, SafeTracks has a life of its own now. It's been deployed to so many territories globally, And when I look at the impact that has had, I know that SafeTracks has been used in real search and rescues, right? So that's helped save lives, which is incredible. So that for me, that's very gratifying. When I look at what technology in general has done to society, it certainly brought us together. I will be honest, Tim, that from very early on, when social networking started to emerge, I was highly suspicious. I was very concerned from early days about the impact that it would have on people, on not unregulated in the sense that governments needed to regulate it. It's from a self-regulation perspective. And I think that, myself and many other people have shared those concerns. I think we're seeing that in many ways. But look, you will argue as well that it's probably done equally as much good, if not more so. And that's obviously changed things enormously. I think that the commoditization of software our infrastructure really, has also been a game changer. And we saw the emergence of cloud providers like AWS, Azure, and Google Cloud Platform. That's obviously a game changer for organizations as well, because you no longer have to have a data center. You no longer have to worry about compute at scale. If you know what you're doing and you've got a good relationship with these guys, they'll support you every step of the way. And you'd be able to embrace contemporary engineering principles such as infrastructure as code, policy as code, compliance as code, and you can ship software iterations quickly and reliably. And that's a game changer as well, because software release cycles were measured in quarters or biannually or whatever they were. Now we do multiple deployments to production every day. And it's because we've got these code pipelines, which are all, these things didn't appear overnight. They evolved from, the emergence of cloud technology. And then people being people, they realized that, well, we can control all of this using code. We no longer need to get cables and get racks and connect all these things together physically. We can do it using code. So again, that has been been a huge game changer. I think for me as well, personally, I have a very keen interest in augmented human interactions. So what do people see, feel, and experience through digital experiences? So I'm really excited to see what's going to happen from not just a home entertainment perspective, but an education and workplace training and all of those kind of things with the next generation of virtual reality and immersive reality. So that for me is something that's incredible. And, you know, I see it in my own kids, the way that they now interact with technology. You know, my twins, every screen they just swipe on. They don't know what a keyboard is, and they automatically expect whatever they're interacting with to respond to "Hey Google" or "Hey Siri" or whatever. You know, they expect that conversational user interaction. So again, I'm, you know, I'm here with my bag of popcorn, just waiting to see what's going to happen. You know, it's we're entering some incredibly exciting times. You know, very fortunate to be alive at this time, I guess.
And Jason, you obviously moved to Australia 9 years ago, and that had its own challenges, and obviously it had its successes. From a family point of view, growing up in Australia, just how different is it now? You know, with Rachel and the three kids, you know, growing up in Australia than it would be growing up in Ireland.
Yeah. So how different is it? Look, we have more sunshine, right? So number one. So the outdoors is very much part of our lives. Even from, you know, cooking dinner. You know, I because I work typically very long hours during the week. I love being the weekend chef. But even during winter, I'll cook outside on the barbecue, right? So it's not that I'm burning steaks or anything like that. You know, I'll get the rotisserie going or the roast, or, you know, I might get the smoker going, something like that. So that's great to be amongst nature when you're doing stuff like that. I think access to facilities here is better for the kids. Jack is an incredible swimmer, and just around the corner from where we are, we're very fortunate. The local pool, there's an Olympian. He swam in Beijing and won 2-3 Olympic medals for Australia at the time. And his mum runs the local pool, and it's an amazing high performance environment. Very family oriented, but again very focused on the swimming. You know, but in general, you know, for all of that, he does miss out on the kids, and Rach and I do miss out on that family connection. We don't have family over here. So again, during COVID, that has been amplified in so many ways. We have some very close friends, but again, that friends are amazing, but they're not family. You know, I spoke about Stuart earlier on. You know, we haven't had a pint together in 8 years. You know, I'd go home tomorrow and have a pint with him if I could. But these are the things that this is the price we pay. And I think up until March last year, we all thought that the world was getting smaller. I don't think the world has ever felt bigger, to be honest. Because when you're living in Australia as we do today, there's no way really out, and there's no way really in, because it's hard to ask elderly, you know, older family members or family members with kids, well, you have to quarantine for 2 weeks when you come into the country. So there is that almost impenetrable barrier. But in general, our lifestyle here in Australia is fantastic. I mean, we live about 50 minutes away from Melbourne, one of the most livable cities in the world. You know, we've got access to art and museums and, you know, things for the kids to do, zoos, etc. And we live down on the Mornington Peninsula, which is you know, we've got Port Phillip Bay basically over there, and we've got the Tasman Sea behind me. Yeah, and we've embraced all the things that they offer as well. So when we first came over here, never sailed in my life, and I'm a terrible swimmer, but I joined the local Mornington Sailing Club. Again, put myself out there, very welcoming, ended up falling in with a bunch of great guys. And yeah, I've delivered a yacht from Hamilton Island, sailed down the east coast of Australia in a storm, or well, part of it in a storm, came into Sydney Harbour at 1 o'clock in the morning in a storm, which is quite interesting. We've delivered a yacht from Tasmania, sailed across the Tasman Strait, done things like that. So just growing up in Ireland, things like that just never seemed accessible. Whereas here in Australia, all of that is accessible to the kids. I'm sure it is accessible in Ireland in 2021 today. And And I guess that is just that access to experiences, and Australia being a continent as well. There's nothing really that you can't experience or do here. We were only about 6 weeks ago, we were in the high country, and Jack went snowboarding for the first time. So we had snow, and then we came down here to the peninsula, we had sunshine, and that's only 5 hours away. So you've got that mix of experiences as well, the one thing I would call out as being radically different is definitely the education. Typically people pay for their education over here, and I just reflect on, again, my own education at home, and Rachel, she reflects on hers. We'd like a little bit more of that, please. The quality of Irish education is so high, and that's reflected in the caliber of our candidates, and the caliber of people who travel far and wide, and the impact that they have in industry and on society. So hopefully in time, who knows, the kids might be able to come back to Ireland to maybe go to university or something like that.
Well, that's for the future, Jason. For now, it's been an absolute pleasure chatting to you. I think you started talking about the inspiration your mom was, and you can see that coming through all throughout this chat that we've had. Your relationship with your brother, how important that was. So that indicates the importance of people to you, not just siblings. And then, to me, I think the word that encapsulates everything is being mindful of the impact that your shadow has on the people that you cast it on. You've definitely had a big impact on the shadow of the mindset shift. It's been great to chat to you, and I wish you continued success and look forward to chatting to you again in the future.
It's been a pleasure, Tim. Thank you so much.
Thank you for watching The Mindset Shift. For more episodes, check out www.talenthub.ie/The Mindset Shift.